Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Getting into proactive policing, this is where I really wanted to dive into the iceberg, right? The generation, because reactive policing, you can say, well, it's an emergency, it's a dispatch. Proactive policing is not based off a 911 call. And it's really important. Now, I'm going to do a case study of Ferguson here because this is where the Department of Justice report really sheds some light on the iceberg. A lot of the proactive policing is actually not even safety or what I would call law and order related. It's fine generation. It's about collecting fines and fees. And this was really true in Ferguson. So Ferguson, Missouri has a municipal court that's under the oversight of the county clerk. But importantly for this thing, remember that the county clerk, not the judge, but the clerk, is an employee of the Ferguson Police Department. So this municipal court with oversight of Ferguson, again, Ferguson only has 20,000 people in it. The code of Ferguson reads like the homeowners agreement from hell, the HOA covenant from hell. They have literally regulated every aspect of living in this city. Housing violations, you need permits to rent, you need removal of trash service, animal control, barking dog running at large, walking. They have a way and manner of walking. Are you walking in a roadway, the manner in which you're walking the road, everything is regulated. And these are not safety related violations, or what I would call municipal code violations. And when these citations, the citations that are generated from this are not exactly clear as to what they're describing or if you need to attend court. So say, for example, your trash was out, you could be issued a citation by the Ferguson Municipal Court as a fine to say this, and you wouldn't know necessarily what date that trash was out or if you needed to go to court. Now, the trick with Ferguson is that most cities, when they issue a fine, you go down and you pay the fine. You don't need to go to court if you're just going to pay the fine. But in Ferguson, of 376 municipal offenses, almost 230 required a court appearance. So you couldn't just go pay the fine. You also had to go to the court. And things that required a court appearance were dog creating a nuisance, equipment violations, no passing zones, right? Overgrown vegetation. If you had overgrown vegetation, you had to go to court. You couldn't just pay the fine. It's a failure to remove leaves. The courts themselves were, and we'll get into a little bit more of why this is, they were very much run like machines. There's testimony in there that if you didn't have a lawyer, and you tried to argue your case, there was a tendency in the town to arrest you for contempt and hold you in jail for up to 10 days. So like defendants who would try and go and you have your day in court, you want to contest this fine of your trash, you could be arrested, in contempt of court. Even folks who had lawyers, the lawyers testified to the Department of Justice that there were frequent interruptions of the defense they tried to have by the court. And when they objected to the interruptions of the case they were making, the court threatened to arrest the lawyers and put them in jail. And this is where it really builds the iceberg, is these these are not these are not safety violations, these are sort of code violations. But the key is the court can assess a fine of up to $1,000 for any violation. And if you fail to appear in the court, that's another fine on top of the first one. And it's important to talk about, how much is going on in this court. So this is a fine scheme. So let me show this picture here of what this looked like. Right, this is the leading up. So by way of clearing the chart, municipal violations and fine collection 2009 to 2014, Ferguson, source of the Department of Justice. On the left, you have the number of violations that were issued by this court. On the right, you have the fines and fees that were either budgeted or collected. And what the chart shows is it shows from 2009, it showed the number of traffic violations and the number of non-traffic violations. Now, traffic violations, some of these may be safety related, but like 98, 99% of them were non-safety related. Oh, and by the way, you have the population of the city here held, and you can see the population is constant. It's not adjusting much over the years. But what happened is there was this dramatic increase in the number of violations, and what's driving that is here, you see this blue line here? This is the targeted budget for the city of Ferguson to say, we anticipate we're going to get this much money from fines. And you can see in 2010, it's a little bit less than 1.5 million, same in 2011. And then it jumps. In 2012, the target raises up quite significantly, and they actually beat the target. They increased the revenue target by 30%, and then brought in more in this. This red line is the actual revenue they earned. And that began this feedback cycle where every year they would set the new budget target at the amount they collected from the past year. So you can kind of see here in 2012, fiscal year 2012, that becomes the target in 2013, and the actual collected is more. So what's collected in 2013 becomes the target in 2014, and then that's exceeded. And keep in mind, the protest from Michael Ferguson's death occurred in August of 2014. So this is the context of what's driving this iceberg, this massive proliferation of municipal violations, mainly for fines and revenue, leading up to the death of Michael Brown. First of all, of all of these violations that were issued, the Department of Justice could only find one case that required jail time for the violation itself. So if you think like there's a violation for firearms, you may say, okay, that needs jail time. Safety violations tend to have jail time associated with it. Overwhelmingly, like as I said, only one of the violations they found had jail time up front. Overwhelmingly, these violations themselves carry no jail time for the underlying offense. They're, failure to collect leaves, manner of walking in a street. These don't carry jail time in the violation. However, in the Municipal Code of Ferguson, if you fail to appear to the court or you fail to pay any, either the fine or any installment of a fine, then you are subject to arrest, even if the violation itself, the underlying violation, isn't arrestable. So this is what drives the funnel, and this is where we start looking now at what's driving this, right? This is whites, non-Hispanics in Ferguson. And again, these are normalized. So this is now Ferguson. We were looking at the iceberg in Ferguson, and or nationally, now we're looking at the iceberg in Ferguson. Municipal violations per 10,000. There were 8,700 municipal violations, which led to 8,700 charges per 10,000. And again, as I said last week, there's only about 6,000 or 7,000 whites in Ferguson. So I don't want people to say, well, there's not 10,000 whites. The chart's wrong. It's a normalized per capita, so we can make meaningful comparisons to another population. But this is not good for whites either, obviously. It's like 8,700 municipal violations, drives to the charges, drives to the vehicle stops, drives to the vehicle searches, and arrested per 100,000, right? So this is the black. This is the iceberg, right? This is the black experience. So it was 8,700 for whites. For blacks per 10,000, the municipal violations are 33,000, right? That's what drives this. Again, these are not safety and law and order. This is, you get a violation for not picking up your trash. You don't know to appear in the court because it doesn't say so on the citation. You miss the court date. They add a failure to appear violation on top of it. That has an arrest warrant that can be issued, plus an additional fine. And this is what's driving that funnel, right? This municipal code violation that's not violence related or crime related. And remember, the criminal rate stayed constant throughout the period in question, 2009 to 2014. Violent crime stayed constant. So that growth in violations was not driven by a need for addressing crime. It was driven by a need to collect more revenues and fees, which was evidenced by the fact that they take the amount they got last year and make that target for the next year. And what this results in is a disparity between black and white interactions in Ferguson with the court and the police. If you look at compared the white experience and the black experience for municipal violations per 10,000, blacks are 4 times more likely to have 1 or more municipal violations than whites. 2.5 times more likely to get charged, 2.5 more times likely to be vehicle stopped, nearly 5 times more likely to have their vehicles searched, and the arrested as a result per 10,000 is about 6 times more likely. Because what happens is, as the court begins issuing these arrest warrants, not for failure to pick up leads, but for failure to appear in court, failure to pay your fine on time, the police would constantly stop people in the city. And this is documented in the report that they would target those who looked ignorant and conduct a stop to see if they had warrants. Now, constitutionally, that's illegal. You can't stop someone without reasonable suspicion that they have either violated a crime or a statute that they're doing so now, or that they are in the process of doing one. You can't just stop people and check them for warrants. But that was what Ferguson was doing, and they were arresting anyone they found. So and these are not all black men. These are 67-year-old black women. These are people who didn't know they even had a citation against them that drove this. And so this is really, I think, speaks to a lot of why are the police, this disparate policing begins much earlier in the, and I'm not saying the police are free from blame in this. Remember, the police, the county clerk in the courthouse is a police department employee, but the municipality itself had a scheme or organization to basically generate revenue. And it's very clear because they have the emails, they have the conversations. This was about revenue. And what they did is they basically increased enforcement of municipal violations for anything. You hear the phrase walking while black, running while black, driving while black. Literally in Ferguson, it was living while black. There was no way you could escape 396 different violations you could be tagged of 230 of which require a court appearance. What they did then is when people didn't appear for court because they didn't know or they missed a payment, that's when they used the police. The police were used as a fine collection dragnet. And they would basically use this because once you're arrested, now you really have to pay, and they would do bonds. And there's a whole bunch more. But if the arresting itself was disparate, the police officer always has the discretion of whether to arrest on a warrant. And they found that, and I'm going off the top of my head here, but I think it was something like 96% of arrests made off officer discretion were black. They weren't, and you saw the whites had their, it wasn't that this was easy living for the whites in the town either. Their municipal violations and things like that as well were high. But it was clearly disparately policed against the black population. And this drives that iceberg. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.